Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session of our conference entitled We Must, We Can, and We Will Solve the Climate Crisis. My name is Henry Chong, and I'm the founder of the Sustainability and Climate Action Leadership Exchange, SCALE for short. During this session, we'll have a keynote speaker, followed by a panel discussion. I welcome all of you to post any questions you may have, and we'll try our very best to answer as many of them as we can. I used to work in the oil and gas industry for over 10 years, so I might have an insider's view on the impact the industry has on climate change. But it wasn't until I had my own children that I began taking the effects of climate change more seriously. In 2017, I decided to pivot my career and my entire lifestyle in the hope to build a greener planet for my children to live in before it's too late. It hasn't been easy for me since, convincing people and corporations to go green, even more so now with the pandemic and the global recession. I think we may very well be facing the greatest challenge of our generation. Therefore, I founded SCALE to be a global community which provides multiple platforms for anyone to tackle climate change and its associated issues. If you have attended the other two SCALE conferences earlier this week, you will have heard from the United Nations, governments, business leaders, and NGOs. In today's climate change dialogue, however, you'll hear from volunteers, climate activists, and students, among others. SCALE will continue to create platforms for voices to be heard, ideas to be exchanged, and action to be called. I believe it is going to take all of us to solve the climate crisis together. But more importantly, it will be our individual decision to take the first step that will make the difference. Speaking of making the difference, let me introduce to you our presenter, Wei-Tai Kwok, who is one of the leading volunteer public speakers for the Climate Reality Project, the global NGO founded by former US Vice President Al Gore. Wei-Tai is a Chinese American whose parents grew up in Shanghai and is joining us from his home in San Francisco. In his day job, he works in the solar and renewable energy industry, most recently as COO of Amber Kinetics, an early-stage flywheel energy storage company in California with manufacturing in the Philippines. He started off in the solar energy industry back in 2009 as Vice President of Global Marketing for Suntec Power, based in Wuxi, China. Wei-Tai helped Suntec open their first factory in Phoenix, Arizona. He has also held executive role at Andale Solar and NRG Energy. Wei-Tai, welcome to the conference.
Thank you, Henry, and greetings all of you who are attending this virtual gathering of this International Green Tech and Energy Conference in Malaysia. As Henry mentioned to you, my name is Wei-Tai Kwok, and I'm calling in and joining you today from my home out in the San Francisco Bay Area here in California. Now, before I begin my presentation, I actually want to share a story about myself and tell you about why I'm here with you today, what brought me here today. And that story begins back in 2006 when I went out to the movie theater with my wife, Violet, and we saw a film called An Inconvenient Truth. It was a documentary about former Vice President from the United States, Al Gore, and about global warming and climate change. I remember leaving the movie theater that day and thinking about, hey, if what we heard was true about climate change, we don't have 100 years to solve this problem, probably just 30 or 40 years. And at that time, my two children, Shelly and Gareth, and they're here. That's Gareth in kindergarten and my daughter Shelly, who was in 3rd grade with my mom in the garden. They were only 6 and 9 years old. And if we only had 30 or 40 years to solve this problem, it would be too late for them to deal with global warming. I realized that it would have to be the adults of today, myself and my wife, to be the ones that have to address this problem. Now, at the time, I was the head of my own advertising agency, Day Advertising. I'd been there for 16 years running the business, and I had 35 employees. Business was doing fine. Being a very research-oriented person, I spent all of the next 3 months reading everything I could about climate change and whether it was happening or not. And unfortunately, I came to two conclusions. The first was that the planet's temperature is definitely rising, and it's probably caused by human causes. And secondly, that our political leaders were doing absolutely nothing about it. And that made me really angry and upset. Because even if I, an advertising guy, could figure out that climate change was happening, why weren't my political leaders here in the United States doing something about it? So it was really then and there that I resolved to myself that I would like to become part of the solution. But the question was how? How do we as individuals, how could I really make a dent on something as big and important as climate change? I spent many restless nights and weeks thinking about it. And every night when I came from home from work and I was brushing my teeth, I'd ask myself, what did you do today to be part of the solution to the climate crisis? And every day I had pretty much the same answer. Absolutely nothing. I was busy with my clients. I was busy with my employees. I was stuck in traffic. I had pretty much every excuse, except I knew I was doing nothing. And it wasn't before long that this really got me a bit depressed, and I couldn't really pay attention at work. I didn't enjoy going to meetings anymore. I didn't even really enjoy going to work at my own company, partly because I realized that not only was I not part of the solution every day, but that in fact, I was part of the problem because I knew climate change was happening, and yet I was not doing anything to be part of the solution. And eventually, to make a long story short, I realized I had to quit my job and quit my career and push the restart button and find another career that could be part of the solution. And that's eventually how I got into the solar industry back in 2009, and how, with the idea that the more solar panels we could sell, the less we would rely on fossil fuels. And also, I later got trained by Al Gore and the Climate Reality Project to deliver public presentations like the one I'm going to be sharing with you later today. So just as a quick preview, today I'm no longer depressed. I wanted to say that I, over the last 7 years, have actually become quite hopeful that we will actually solve the climate crisis in our generation, my generation, and just in time. And so I want to share with you today some of what makes me optimistic. Some of that involves what this conference is all about, which is business solutions to climate change, clean energy, innovation, entrepreneurship. And so these are the things that make me hopeful. Let's dive into the presentation, and then I look forward to having a Q&A and discussion with you after we're done. Okay, so with that, let me share my screen and let's get started. Let's begin our story 50 years ago on Christmas Eve, 1968, when this photograph was taken by the first of the Apollo missions. I love this photo because it looks so vibrant and beautiful and lonely at the same time. I say it's lonely because it's the only planet that we know of in the whole universe that can sustain life. All life forms call this the big blue marble because it's our home, and our home is being threatened. In talking about the climate crisis, there are really three questions that we have to ask ourselves. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? Let's go through them one at a time. And the first one, must we change, is one that requires a little bit of explanation about what the climate crisis is all about. You see, many human activities on planet Earth contribute to greenhouse gases which warm our planet. For example, air transportation, oil production, forests burning, and even industrial agriculture raising cows. These are all sources of greenhouse gases. But the biggest source by far is actually our dependence on fossil fuels, which results in an amazing amount of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. You can see that after World War II, it's really started shooting up, and it's still going up, unfortunately. Here it is year by year. If we take a look at the temperatures of the planet going back to 1880, when weather instruments first started measuring our temperatures, you can see the clear direction is up, up, up. In fact, for this year, 2020, scientists calculate there's a 70% chance likelihood that this will be the new hottest year ever. 19 of the 20 hottest years have all been since 2001, and the 5 hottest years ever measured have been the last 5 years. These are terrible records that we don't want to be setting. Last year in Europe, temperatures in Europe broke big records in all these countries listed here, which they set their individual hottest records. And this past summer in June, north of the Arctic Circle in Siberia, it went over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius. It's probably the hottest temperature north of the Arctic Circle ever measured. Now, so far, I've been talking about air temperature. But what about water temperature in our oceans? Because, 93% of all that extra heat is actually being trapped in and our atmosphere. They're being absorbed into our oceans. And so when we look at ocean temperatures over the past 100 years, you can also see the same trends, up, up, up. And once again, it's very, very likely that this year will set a record for ocean warmth. Now, of course, with warming oceans, they have a bad impact on coral reefs. The Great Barrier Reef, which is one of the great wonders of the world, suffered its 3rd severe and most widespread bleaching last year. And when we say bleaching, the coral has a hard structure of calcium carbonate covered by a very thin membrane where these little critters called zooxanthella, where they live. And that's what gives the coral their color. But when the temperature goes up too much, these little critters leave and the membrane becomes transparent, and then the white shines through the calcium carbonate. And if that happens repeatedly, the corals will die. Another consequence of warmer waters is that the sex of sea turtles is actually determined by the water temperature at the time they're born. And when they're born in the northern part of the Great Barrier Reef closest to the equator, 99% of those young green sea turtles are now being born female. That doesn't work very well for obvious reasons. Scientists have also warned that if temperatures continue to rise unchecked, then we could see 40 to 60% of fish species at risk by the end of this century. And with so many people, 1 billion people living near oceans and relying on fish as their main source of protein, this is, of course, a great risk. And also to all of us who love eating fish like myself, this is something we cannot stand for. Another concern about warmer ocean temperatures is that they contribute to stronger storms. This is a chart showing the Philippines back in November 2013 when Super Typhoon Yolanda was headed towards the central Visayas. And with red being warmer temperatures and pink being less warm temperatures. But you can see that the water was more than 3 degrees Celsius warmer than normal. And these storms are fed their energy from the convection of those warm top layers of the ocean. And they also get extra moisture from the evaporation. And what happens is that they become very big and powerful storms to make landfall, with the impact being terrible on society. In this case, 16 million people were impacted by this Typhoon Haiyan, and it destroyed over 1 million homes in the Philippines. The Philippines is actually one of the countries most susceptible to climate change because of its geographic position on our planet, with typhoons coming in off the ocean, as I just mentioned. But they're the ones who contributed least to the problem. They emitted the least amount of CO2. So when we talk about environmental justice or climate justice, this is a really important example of how unfair it is that the poorest people suffer the gravest consequences of the climate crisis. And I believe this is a real moral imperative that we address. I want to shift gears here and talk about, the same extra heat that we've been talking about, disrupting the water cycle, putting more moisture in the air and creating greater downpours. That same heat is pulling more moisture out of the soil and making for worse droughts that are deeper and longer. And this summer in Europe, groundwater levels are alarmingly low. There are places like in the Czech Republic that are experiencing the worst drought in over 500 years. And speaking of drought, here in California, we've had one of our worst droughts the last decade. Over the last 400 years, it's been the worst this past decade. And coming with rising temperatures, this is a chart showing how warmer temperatures are causing more wildfires. And that associated with our drought is having very serious consequences. in 4 or 5 years of wildfires. This is a picture of my wife visiting her cousin's house in Santa Rosa, California, just 90 minutes north of where we live. And back in 2017, her husband was woken up in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. by the police pounding on the door saying, get out, the fire's coming. They jumped in the car, they drove off, and that night their house burned to the ground. That's their Toyota Camry. That was, what's left of it, and the Ford minivan behind it, what's left of it. He was thankfully he's okay, but he's a coin collector and of ancient Indian and Chinese coins. And he had hidden them all over his house. And unfortunately, when he came back to look for them, they were just melted mounds of metal, which were worthless. So it was really crushing loss for his coin collection. But these fires, which you've probably read about, hundreds of them are now burning or have been burning the last few weeks in California. It's our most severe fire season right where we live here in my state. The air pollution has been horrendous. This is a chart showing how bad across the entire West Coast the air pollution has been. We had 28 days of a nonstop record severe air pollution where we were warned to stay indoors. We never had that before. And there was one morning in September 9th that my wife woke me up at 9:30, and instead of it being blue skies, it was dark outside. It was dark and orange. She said, wait till I go outside, something's wrong. The sun didn't come up this morning. And so that's me in my pajamas out on my back deck. And I thought I'd been transported to Mars. It was dark orange and just really, really creepy. That is a day that San Franciscans will definitely remember for the rest of our lives. And, me and my neighbors, when we had this time period, I think we definitely feel fear of wildfire danger. None of us think that, oh, that won't happen to us. Our house won't be lost. No, we're all getting ready just in case our house would be burned to the ground tomorrow. In fact, we called my son Gareth, who's now in college, and asked him, hey, if your room burned to the ground tomorrow, what do you want us to keep? And he said, well, you can tell he's a sports fan. So he said, be sure my autographed bobblehead of Klay Thompson and my autographed baseball and football helmets, please grab them. Those are his most precious belongings. And we called our 23-year-old daughter in Boston. She said, oh, please save my birthday cards collection, and also be sure to save my stuffed teddy bear and set that aside. So we loaded up our kids' most precious belongings, our own precious belongings, into the back of the car. That's what our car looks like right now. So that tonight, if I need to jump in the car and escape at 3 a.m, we're ready to evacuate in the middle of the night. And yes, those are my golf clubs in the back. So you know what my priorities are. But actually, more seriously, these worldwide extreme weather catastrophes, the fires, the floods, the storms I've been talking about are happening all over the world. And the reinsurance industries are tracking this. And over just 40 years, you can see a quadrupling of the quantity of natural disasters, extreme weather catastrophes. And so these consequences are high. But let's shift gears and take a look at another reason we must change. Here's a glacier photo in 1935 compared to 2013. You can see it's pretty much melted all away, less than a century later. And due to the rising temperatures, all this extra melting is actually raising the sea levels worldwide. In fact, here's where they're going in Miami Beach, Florida, which is one of the low-lying places in the United States. This is actually a sunny day. This is not the result of a storm. It's actually September. So the Mid-Autumn Festival, when the moon is big, it's actually the time when the moon is closest to the Earth, and the gravitational pull actually pulls the oceans to be having these sort of king tides. So this time of year in September in Miami, low-lying areas, there is this type of flooding as a result of the sea levels that have already risen more than when these streets were built. And if we look around the world at the top 10 cities worldwide, most at risk for sea level rise in the next 50 years, look at this: Kolkata, Mumbai, Dubai, Guangzhou, Ho Chi Minh, Shanghai. These are all mostly in Asia. So you can imagine if these major cities became partially uninhabitable due to that sea level rise that we just saw, where will all those people go? These climate refugees are going to put a lot of pressure on those countries already tight for livable space. So there's no question, there's a big cost of carbon. A lot of the negative reasons that we won't have time to go into in this talk, but some of which I've touched on, it's really a huge threat to the global economy, number one threat, in fact, according to delegates at Davos the last several years. So when we asked ourselves the question, must we change? Clearly, yes, the consequences are dire. We've got to change. So that begs us to ask the second question, can we change? And here's where we've got some good news. And I told you I'm no longer depressed like I was, because we do have many solutions at hand, and many that we're going to be discussing at this conference. Renewable energy, for example, specifically wind energy, has been a great success. And in Germany, the first half of this year, more than 50% of their electricity has come from renewable energy. Worldwide, there's really been this exponential growth curve of wind energy in the last decade. It's been amazing. And solar, the story is even better. In some places like my state of California, where 50% of all solar panels installed in America are installed in my sunny state of California, we've had some days where 80% of our electricity on the grid is coming from renewable electricity generation. And so that trend is happening all over the world. I told you I joined the solar industry back in 2009, right when this curve started to go up. So it actually ended up being a very good career choice. And so for those of you who are already in the industry, or those of you who are thinking to get into the renewable industry, I think it's a great growth curve, and there's many, many more decades of growth ahead of us. A lot of this growth is driven by the reduction of costs, in this case of solar panels and solar modules, down to about 20 cents a watt. That's down 90% just in my decade in the industry. It's just way faster than we had been expecting, and it's really the cause of massive change. So if we ask ourselves at that price point, how does that compare against coal and natural gas? Well, in the first half of my career in solar, back in 2014, electricity from solar and wind was cheaper in only about 1% of the world compared to coal and gas plants. But just 5 years later, by 2019, solar was competitive with coal in 2/3 of the countries around the world. And fast forward a couple years from now, 4 more years, it's expected that these sources are going to provide the cheapest electricity in the entire world. And that is all of this, everything we've seen on this time scale. It's only 10 years that we've gone from 1% to potentially 100% beating fossil fuels on price. So that makes me very hopeful. And when we take a look at investors' confidence, you could see back in 2014 or 2009, rather, 11 years ago, the amount of dollars invested in fossil fuel generation versus was a little bit higher than renewables. But a couple years later, renewable energy got more investments. And this past year in 2019, you can see the growth of renewables is really eclipsing, and fossil fuel investments are going down, down, down. So that's all happening in the right direction, in my view. And as a result of this, renewable energy now makes up 80% of all the new electricity capacity being built around the world in 2019. Specifically, if we look at some regions around the world, in Europe, 88% of the new capacity they're building for electricity is from solar and wind. In the United States, we saw solar and wind making up 70% of new capacity. And over in China, even the majority, more than 50%, is solar and wind. Finally, in India, 55% of new electricity generation is made up of solar and wind. They're still building coal in China and India. We really want to see that go down, but the good news is that solar and wind are doing well and strong. Now, here's a really interesting development I learned about this year. This is a 4,500 kilometer high voltage cable connecting Singapore to some of the most massive solar farms planned in Australia. This would be the longest undersea electricity cable in the world, and it's currently a feasibility being announced. So some of these really amazing ideas are coming forward about how renewable energy could power the world. So so we see that around the world we have these solutions. So let's talk a little bit about what can you do, or what can I do to be part of the solution. And so I want to share now some of the personal and business solutions I'm working on, which I hope can spark some creative ideas for you, no matter where you live around the world. Back here in California, back in 2012, I decided to go solar and drive electric. That's me on my roof installing the last solar panel. And I also bought a Nissan Leaf electric vehicle at the time. So if you have both solar and an electric car, guess what? I was already driving an electric car for the last 8 years. It's not something that's something in the future that we could drive solar powered cars. The technology is here today. Now, I thought I was doing as much as I could to be part of the solution to climate change until I started hearing this word called building decarbonization. And that's an effort here in California to stop using natural gas in our homes and buildings. And so let me share one of the advertisements that I saw that was talking about this, because I think that can explain it a little bit better than I can.
Did you know that gas appliances in our homes, like furnaces, stoves, and water heaters, are big contributors to the climate crisis? Gas-burning appliances account for about half of our home energy use. They also release invisible but dangerous pollutants that cause asthma and respiratory problems, especially in children. Gas lines can also leak or break, causing explosions and dangerous fires. Luckily, we have better, more reliable options we can count on. All electric appliances are safe, don't pollute the air in our homes, and can be powered with 100% clean, renewable energy. They are also far more efficient and can lower our energy bills. Choosing all-electric appliances is a win for our health, safety, and the climate, which is why cities around the country are clearing the path for a gas-free future. Tell your city leaders that your community wants to benefit from going gas-free too.
So one of the messages in that advertisement was that burning fossil fuels inside our house actually releases pollutants into the air. I'd really not thought about it, but my natural gas stove, sure, we're supposed to turn the vent on, but many times we cook without the vent on. And when I think about it, would I put a car or a motorcycle in my house and run the gas and let it burn with no ventilation? But yet, no, of course we wouldn't do that. But yet every time we cook in my house, we've had natural gas burning. So I sort of had an education myself on the health dangers of burning fossil fuels in my home. So I started to look around my home to see how and where we could get rid of it. And one by one, we said, oh, let's change our hot water heater to a heat pump hot water electric. Let's change our gas fireplace to an electric fireplace. Let's change that gas cooktop to an induction electric cooktop. And finally, for heating in our house, let's use heat pump mini splits for our air conditioning and heating. It turns out we replaced all of these appliances in less than 45 days in my house. And I was able to go zero emission household that quickly. One of the benefits of high efficiency heat pump electric is, in fact, its high efficiency. When you compare my old gas furnace or gas hot water heater, my gas furnace was 85% efficient. My hot water heater was 57% efficient. And I replaced them with like 350, 450% efficient heat pump technology. So this is the technology, better technology exists today, and that'll let me basically disconnect from the gas grid. Here was me that last year, turning off the gas to my house, calling the gas company, and for free, they came and removed my meter. So my house is fully powered by 100% renewable energy and is emission free. Now, you might be laughing at us Americans for discovering heat pump mini splits, which are actually so common every time I travel all over Asia. Here is a picture in Japan of how common they are in the stores. We never see this in the United States. But I show you this picture just to emphasize that many of the technologies that are solutions to the climate crisis are already existing. They're already here. It really just takes more policy advocacy, policymakers, entrepreneurs to set their minds to the goal of urgently transitioning away from fossil fuels to create that cleaner, healthier world. And let me switch now to another category, which I think is very exciting, and it's also about to be revolutionized, and that is food. Specifically, changing to a plant-based diet, I think, can help with the climate crisis. This is because eating red meat and beef contributes to the amount of cows out there who are burping methane as they are eating their grass. Methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. And so I've been reducing my own intake of meat the last few years. but I like meat. And so actually I was glad that there's some new high-tech plant-based hamburger companies coming to market. And so I went to have an Impossible Whopper made from plants. It really tastes like the real thing. And I even had my mom and dad try it. They liked it too. They said, hey, this tastes good. Some of the environmental benefits of plant-based meats make it a really important pathway to a sustainable future. Here's a comparison of a plant-based meat against its beef counterpart, showing that the aquatic pollutants are declined by 92%. It's got 89% less global warming potential, less land use, and less water consumption. So very, very significantly less impact on our environment if we can go to a plant-based diet. And so for this reason, I've actually enjoyed going to the grocery store and trying every new type of plant-based meat that's on the shelves. And, some are not that good, like the one in the middle, sort of tastes like cardboard. I wouldn't try it again, but there are actually a lot of good ones out there, including this one, which I made spaghetti sauce from, and it was delicious. And so when we ask ourselves, can we change, that second question, the answer is resoundingly yes. We don't have to use fossil fuels to power our cars, to power our homes, cook our food. In fact, we can have delicious new options even in what we eat. So really, that brings us to the third and final question: will we change? Clearly, this is the most important question. And I am hopeful because the world back in 2015 in Paris, 195 nations agreed unanimously to work together to achieve net zero greenhouse gases by mid-century. And while the United States famously has said we're going to pull out of the Paris Accord, it turns out we cannot legally pull out until one day after the presidential election next month. And if a new president is elected and decides to stay in the Paris Accord, then we would just give 30 days notice and be back in. And I do hope the United States comes back in because we're one of the two top carbon polluters in the world. And we do need to show our leadership and lead on climate and carbon reduction. Now, another thing that gives me great hope is actually the rise of youth action, and particularly this young lady, Greta Thunberg, who at the age of 15 petitioned in front of the Swedish parliament to school strike for the climate was her message. And we all know her global impact of her voice speaking up. In fact, last year in September, when she called for a youth climate strike, I actually joined. I was back in Washington, D.C. in my hometown, and I marched onto Capitol Hill to make sure that American leaders knew that I wanted my voice to be heard and that I am concerned about urgent action on climate. So she inspired me. Youth are really inspiring me today. So I ask you to join those who are using their voices and who are casting their votes and making their purchasing choices on what they buy to fight for the future of their community and for the world. I ask you to use your voice to speak up, to vote for climate change solutions, and to make those purchasing choices that also make a difference. And by speaking truth to power, speaking truth of the climate crisis to those in power, I encourage you to do that like your world depends on it, because in fact, actually our world does depend on it. So thank you very much for your attention. Let's now transition over to our panel discussion.
Hello, everyone. My name is Henry Chong, and I'll be your moderator for today's panel discussion. I'm the founder of the Sustainability and Climate Action Leadership Exchange, SCALE for short. Thank you very much for joining us today. Today's Climate Change Dialogue is brought to you in partnership with the Climate Reality Project. Now, Wei-Tai, in your presentation, there were 3 questions that was asked. Must we, can we, and will we change? The answers were resounding yes to all 3 questions. I have one question which has been weighing on my mind since the video, and I think you can help me clarify that with, I'm sure a lot of the people tuning in has that question as well. Golf clubs. Now, seriously, seriously, man, golf clubs. I can understand your son's autograph, sports memorabilia, your daughter's teddy bear collection, and your birthday, the birthday card collections. your golf clubs.
Yep, you know, a man's got to have his priorities. What Henry's talking about is that I live out in California, and as you saw in the presentation, my wife and I have packed up our car with all our precious possessions just in case the police knock on the door at 3 a.m. saying get out, that we could escape with our most valuable things. And yes, my golf clubs are in there. I'm a terrible golfer, but I hope I would have more time to practice. So that's why they're in there, Henry.
Gosh, you gotta love a man with his priorities straightened out, man.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of the audience, could you tell us a bit more about the Climate Reality Project?
Sure. Well, the Climate Reality Project was founded by former U.S. Vice President Al Gore shortly after he released a famous movie called An Inconvenient Truth. And so that was right around 2006, 2007. And Henry's showing you what Mr. Gore decided to do was to start this nonprofit to train local climate activists like myself and everybody on this call, all my fellow co-panelists, to get trained personally by Al Gore. That first picture was in his barn in Tennessee of 50 people. And this next picture was over 1,000 people being trained in Minnesota. And so currently there are almost 30,000 trainees around the world in almost over 150 countries, and that have gone through a 3-day training in person, or more recently who have gone through the online training. So I encourage any of you that who've watched the presentation today and who are going to listen to the panelists to discuss, we've all gotten trained personally by Mr. Gore and are very much just activated to take urgent action on climate.
Now, Jeremy, you're a mentor in the Malaysian for the Malaysian trainees in the recent virtual global training. How was it like?
Yeah, I was actually a mentor for both the trainings that we had this year, one for the international panel and one for the Malaysian panel. I would actually say that the Malaysian panel was way more exciting because it was closer to home. Especially you can see a few of the panelists here today. It was really cool in the sense that this is how we actually grew our members. And I think with the new addition to the family itself, more conversations are being started and more initiatives are being taken. Yeah, so it was great. Yeah.
Nice. So let's introduce our group of talented climate reality leaders today. I'm going to start off with Melissa Tan. She's a TV host, producer, actress, climate activist, and zero waste advocate, a passionate environmental speaker. She produces events to engage the public in sustainable living, such as the conscious market and clothes swap. Melissa creates digital content as well on topics such as sustainable living and fashion, working with major brands and NGOs on environmental projects. She's also Earth Day Network's ambassador for Malaysia. And thank you, Melissa, for being here. And thank you for realizing 2 of my life goals today. Right here, my life goal number 5 and 7, be on TV with a model and be on TV with an actress. We're not exactly in a TV show or a movie, but you know what? I'll take it. Tell us more about your climate story, Melissa.
Oh, yes. Thanks so much for that, Henry. So I was a crazy eco-recycling kid. I recycled everything in sight. And then at one point, I heard from a zero waste advocate, the person who first started the zero waste store here in Malaysia, and how you could just skip that entire process and not even be part of that consumption cycle of creating trash. And then that kind of like struck a chord with me, because it was my light bulb moment where, well, if I knew so much about the environment, how come I didn't think of this? And then that kind of triggered that whole pathway for me. So it showed me how important it is for us to use our voice to continue to influence others, because people might not have seen something that was right in front of their face like I didn't. So that's how it all began.
Nice. And that's a picture of your clothes swap session, the most recent one, wasn't it?
Yeah, so clothes swaps are a way for me to create opportunities for people to engage in environmental living. So people are inundated with information every day about the earth is dying, we have to do something about it. But, you know, after a while, they kind of get desensitized to it. So when they see the benefits for themselves through experiences like this, it creates a more lasting change, and that habits kind of stick a little better.
Right, right. Awesome. Thanks for that, Melissa. Thanks for the introduction. Moving on to my next guest, Sona. I'm very happy to have Sona Jain here today. She works for a company you probably heard of called Microsoft. Not sure if you have. She's the Asia Business Partnership Lead for Digital Natives. Now, apart from being a climate reality leader, Sona is also a 2041 Ambassador for Climate Change and an advocate for diversity and inclusion. Now, over the years, given her experience, Sona has grown to be a passionate about challenging status quo and conventional societal norm. She enjoys learning about different cultures and embracing them. With over 10 years of experience in tech industry, she has worked with consumers and customers across multiple industries, and she gets her energy from driving high community impact projects professionally as well as personally. Tell us a bit more about yourself, Sona.
Thank you so much, Henry, for having me on the panel today. A little bit more about myself. So I grew up in a very small town in India. Think of it as a tier 4, tier 5 city. And as I was growing up, access to natural resources, electricity was a luxury. So we used to have drinking water supply in our house coming every alternate day for about 1.5 hours in the evening. So it literally used to be like celebration for us that everybody in the house would gather together to kind of store water in earthen pots and utensils. And imagine if you go out on the weekend or on any evening, then you have to request your neighbors to store water for you, because we never had that luxury on a day-to-day basis and a continuous running potable water in our house. Electricity was very similar. We used to have power cuts for about 8 to 10 hours every day. And the state I come from is also a desert, so it used to get really hot for about 46 degrees Celsius on a peak summer afternoon. And it was really hard. But the important part that I learned as I was growing up, and we were also a very humble family where we couldn't afford things like air conditioners and coolers and so forth. So saving electricity was very natural for our family, because my parents also wanted to save expenses and costs, because in such kind of areas, the electricity and water supply is also very expensive. And as I was growing up and I got lucky to kind of start working in bigger cities, I ended up being in a tier 1 city in India where I was absolutely blown away that people did not have issues in terms of accessing resources. They had unlimited supply of electricity. When you walk into conference rooms, you see the lights in the conference rooms up 24/7, and nobody is genuinely conscious and thinking about everything that our people are facing in terms of not having accessible resources in tier 3, tier 4 cities. So for me, that was the aha moment, to just realize that how fortunate I was to be a little bit more empathetic towards and being a little bit more humble in terms of the resources I had access to at a later point of time, which I didn't have earlier. But more importantly, I think what I realized, what it is very important for somebody like me who comes from that background to start creating awareness and start making people a little bit more conscious. Because as Melissa mentioned, a lot of times it is just awareness, like people don't really know what they don't know. And we can all do our part through our own stories and our own experiences to be able to create this world a better place. And the picture that you have just shown is with Robert Swan. So when I was in this tier 1 city, I had the pleasure of working for a project which was related to identifying the small and medium enterprises that are looking towards creating sustainable solutions. And I invited Robert Swan for one of our annual conferences. And I was so inspired by the work that he has been doing over the years to fight climate crisis and climate change, that I was really motivated and see whatever I can do from my perspective to be able to change the world for better. So that was the most pivotal point of my life.
Awesome, awesome. Robert Swan's a legend. He's done great work. For those of you who don't know about Robert Swan, he's the gentleman there on the right, speaking to Sona, not the one on the left. Sorry about that. But Daniel, let's move on to Daniel now. Daniel's a clinical nutritionist and an epidemiologist. Is that how you call it, Daniel? Epidemiologist.
Epidemiologist.
Epidemiologist, yeah. Working on planetary health health system and policy research. He's currently attached with the United Nations University International Institute for Global Health. He works on consulting regional health systems in Western Pacific and Southeast Asia. Besides, he's also the director of Adiante Corporation, an investment holding company for green technology in Malaysia. Apart from his professional career, Daniel is passionate about climate change and youth empowerment. He's the current curator for Global Shaper Community KL, an initiative by the World Economic Forum. He's also one of the founders of You Inspire Malaysia, a UNESCO-endowed NGO working on climate change and disaster risk management. So in 2019, Daniel was pinned as Young Nutritionist at Asia Congress of Nutrition and received Young Investigator Award from MASO for his work on clinical nutrition. His climate advocacy work was also recognized as he was elected to be the steering committee for Youth UNESCO Climate Action Network. He's a proud alumni of RMIT and Monash University. And apart from all this, he still has time to be trained as a climate reality leader. Daniel, tell us more about yourself.
Thank you, Henry, for the kind and long introduction. And thanks for having me in the panel. So my background has always been nutrition. So the climate story is just as simple as in 2010, I was actually embarked in a research project for my doctorate back in Malaysia after spending about 9 years in Australia studying diabetes and hypertension. And then coming back to Malaysia, I got so shocked that when I study, when I do a behavioral change intervention, means I ask everyone to do a lot of changes to become more healthy and everything. And then I found out that there was actually a difference between people who live in the area where there is no industrialization or probably the nearest factory to their house, and someone who lives somewhere a little bit more remote. And then, you know, with everything that we change, I found out that the only difference that they have is actually the exposure to air pollution. And then during that time, I found out that planetary health, or, you know, the health of the planet, is a very unspoken part of well-being. We keep on saying about, you know, how eating good food, being active, exercising, having good sleep is the only thing about well-being. But then actually having a good home with a good air is actually also contributing significantly to our overall health. So for the past 4 years, I've been doing a lot of advocacy in climate. And then this is a picture of me with my fellow climate reality leader organizing the Jakarta climate strike last year. And then, so Jakarta is one of the, you know, most polluted cities in the region. And then it's, you know, it's very empowering to be with them, talking about it. And then they are also realizing it. In Malaysia, we are also doing a lot of work in it. But yeah, it's just a work in progress, and I'm happy to be here to contribute more.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that, Daniel. Moving on to Dom. You know what, Dom, Jeremy, Rafiq, I don't even know how you're gonna top Daniel's introduction. I'm sorry for putting you guys right after him. You know, in hindsight, I shouldn't have lined you guys in alphabetical order.
Yeah, that was a bit.
Yeah, that's my bad actually. So moving on to Dom, retired from a career in hospital management. Dominic O'Sullivan has been a resident in Malaysia now for 3 years. From an early stage, he has a passion for nature. He recently trained as a climate reality leader, raising awareness of the seriousness for climate emergency and what we must do to address it. He's committed to bring a common sense perspective to issues that he believes needs to be shared, debated, and acted upon by all of us and for all of us. Dom, go ahead and tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege to be here this morning, so thank you for that as well. Very briefly, that photo of me is actually taken in North Sulawesi in Indonesia, where I had a good opportunity to go out to a Tasikoke Wildlife Rescue and Education Centre. It's literally where wildlife that has been reclaimed from the illegal wildlife trade are brought into this particular centre, and we try to rehabilitate them and get them to a stage where they can be released. That's not always possible with some of them. It's a bit difficult to rehabilitate a 3-metre estuarine crocodile because nobody seems to want them. So we get those sort of challenges to deal with. But when I retired, having taken a degree early in my career, 3 years, best 3 years of my life studying zoology, went into hospital management. I decided when I was going to retire, I'm going to get back and do something in conservation. Cut a long story short, that's why I'm here now. I'm also a grandfather, and when I was feeling a need to do something, these guys were my motivation. The centre there is my wife and her family's grandchildren. The left and the right are my son and daughter and their children. And I was actually sitting on my couch looking at a couple of children from the neighbour's house the other day, and I was watching them playing, and I'm thinking I could be their grandfather because they look so much like my kids. And I felt a great sense of pride and compassion. And then I suddenly thought, I wonder what they're going to be feeling if they're sitting on their couch looking, as I am, at their grandchildren. So that would be my great-great-grandchildren. And that warm feeling suddenly disappeared. And I thought, my goodness, what sort of earth am I going to be giving them if I don't do something to help where we are now? And I had suddenly heard about the Climate Reality Project and realized that that was a big platform to learn about what's going on and to get to more people to say, we've got to start doing things. So I was fortunate to get onto the training this year, and I haven't been as busy as this in my whole life. And we've only qualified since September the 3rd. So there's a lot going on, and I'm enjoying every moment of it. Thank you for joining us here today as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Dom. So right next we have Jeremy. Jeremy Tan is currently the Senior Manager for the Group Strategy Department of UMW. He was previously a Senior Consultant advising the Ministry of Finance on matters relating to strategy and financials. He's also currently the outgoing Curator for Global Shapers KL and Project Lead for Heads Up, a mental well-being project. Jeremy was trained in LA in 2018 for the Climate Reality Project. Looking from your professional background, Jeremy, you never much involved in climate change and sustainability. What made you first got involved?
Yeah, thank you, Henry. Thank you for lining me up after all the great panelists. You should probably put me first. But like you rightly put it, if you look at my profile, no one will back me as a climate reality leader or sustainability leader, right? But that's the thing, right? That's the thing that we should be actually hoping for, right? Just because we do not need to have a degree or our job scope specifically catered to sustainability in order to practice it. So my sustainability story is really simple. So my inspiration has always been my mom, right? So I work closely with Dr. Daniel, and he came to my house before, and my mom basically recycles everything, right? I think she, if there was a term for it, she would probably be the first zero waste in the generation, I guess. So yes. My mom's a very traditional Chinese mom where, the cookie tins that you see, she stores every single thing, every eggshells, every, plastic packaging for eggshells, she takes it, even the paper ones, she takes it, she recycles it, she resells it, and she even uses it for other different purposes. And I'm quite inspired by her because the creativity that comes from it, from the act of not wasting, actually sparks out a lot of things. So one of the really good examples that got me really ashamed, because when our ice tray broke down or it breaks, the first thing in my mind was, hey, you know what? Let's get to a $5 store to just buy something straight, right? But for her, it's no. We have this eggshells container. I'm just gonna wash it, and I'm just gonna clean it up, dry it, and I'm just gonna put water in it, and now we have an eggshell ice cubes. Yeah. So in the picture you see it. every now and then I go around practicing whatever my projects that I think I can contribute via either my company's CSR projects or via my initiatives with the Global Shapers itself. So on the left, it was one of the projects that I did previously, which is called the Liter of Light, where we went on to install about 60 renewable light bulbs in a kampong called Kampong Gong in Rau, Pahang. So this is where they don't have access to electricity, and they run mainly on generators. So when night falls, they basically can't run any more generators. So this is where the light bulbs actually shines the whole the whole kampong itself. So on the right is where we had a privilege to work with Think City last year in Penang, and we gave our talk on the climate reality project. Yep. Thank you.
Nice, nice. Sounds like your mom and Melissa will get along just fine, right?
I think my mom would love her more than me.
Last but not least, let's move on to Rafiq. Rafiq is a lecturer at Swinburne University of Technology, Sarawak, with a PhD in nanomaterials engineering. Apart from being a chartered mechanical engineer, he's also passionate in winter sports, bicycling, and gardening. After living in Hokkaido for postgraduate studies, he developed a taste for locally grown fresh produce, and once returning to Malaysia, started his own organic hydroponic farm at home. So wonderful stuff. Rafiq, tell us more about how you got into the whole climate movement.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Henry. Thank you for the participants today. My journey, honestly, is already started. Has just started as a climate reality leader. But prior to that, there were a few things that that made me realize the kind of activism, so to say, that I have today, which is to empower people to grow their own food. I had lived in Japan for a few years, and when I lived there, I was staggered by the quality of the local produce that they had. So, but in Malaysia, we have the impression that fruits, vegetables, or any sort of produce, if it is good, it has to be imported. So that also made me realize it's actually that's not the case, So. So there's something else that we should realize as well. In Malaysia, we have the perfect climate for growing pretty much anything, because it's suitable year-round to grow to grow your own food. So what you can see there is are the kind of vegetables that we grow at home. So these would be some kind of cabbage or sawi, and then in the next pictures you can see what Henry called ginger on steroids. Rest assured, I didn't put any performance-enhancing drugs or any chemical industrial fertilizer. These are all organic, by the way. So what I would like to tell you today is that it is not something that is so difficult to do. It is something that you can do by yourself. So as a climate, how did I get into climate reality leadership? I heard it from one of my friends in Terengganu. She's working for WWF for turtle conservation. So she shared the link, and then I was thinking, well, this could be something interesting to do. Might as well enter it. And it turned out to be a lot bigger than I expected. And because this is a global movement. So afterwards, I began to think more and more closely. Okay, this is what I am doing, what I can do, can I do next? And this is where I am right now, growing your own food. And as a result, I don't have to buy them anymore.
Right, thanks for that, Rafiq. Thank you everybody for sharing your story. Wonderful story. Let's kick off with answering some questions that we've got from the online audience, as well as some questions that I have for you. Now let's start off with Daniel. Daniel, you're doing a lot of work in planetary health. Can you tell us more about what planetary health is and why is it so important?
Yeah, sure. So, you know how our life expectancy has increased from 47 years old to 69 years old from the period of 1950 to 2010. But then, recently it drops to 59 years old. And we don't know what's happening. And then with all the advancement in medicine, we have new drugs, new vaccine coming out and everything, our life expectancy still drops. So, despite all this advancement, we also know there's also a degradation of the nature, ecological system, that on a scale that we have never seen for the past 10 years. And in Malaysia, for instance, we are seeing the loss of the rainforest here and everything. And planetary health is just an unspoken part of well-being, where we don't really appreciate the importance of having clean air, clean water, and everything around us. And we found that there's actually the health of humanity is intrinsically linked to the health of the planet. But then our action subconsciously threaten this balance. So it's a new field. It's something that is just being spoken, especially in the region. But I'm working with a lot of experts in the region to make it happen around here. Yeah.
Right. Now, when we talk about planet of the health, the rainforest plays a very important role. Dom, why are rainforests so important in the fight against climate change? You're on mute.
I realized I was on mute. Well, I don't think we yet understand exactly how complex and intricate the rainforest is as an ecosystem and as a living entity. It's not just a big blob of green that we can see out of the window or as we're driving by somewhere. There's a lot going on in rainforests that we've never really appreciated, to be honest. So I asked myself, what are the trees actually doing? They've been there for thousands or even millions of years. What happens if we actually start taking those away? So they do a huge amount that we can't actually see. But they, for example, all living green stuff consumes vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Okay, it's taking carbon dioxide out of the air, and that's one of our biggest problems at the moment, is all these fossil fuel emissions. So if we start taking away a major source of absorbing that and getting rid of it, there's an impact. The impact is that CO2 remains in the atmosphere and it contributes to global warming. That's not good. That's what's driving the whole climate change problem at the moment. The greenhouse effect goes up, weather patterns can change, it can affect rainfall, monsoon patterns, and then there are other cascading consequences that come from that. Another thing they do is they provide a carbon sink, or where the forests grow, or a lot of their organic material gets locked down into the ground and it's not released. And that is another way of actually reducing the impact of global warming. And if we take the forest away, that gets released back into the atmosphere and just makes the problem worse. And we're doing a very good job of making the problem worse. The organic material and root systems penetrate the ground. When they do that, they open up cracks in the ground and the water's absorbed, etc., into that. And the forest acts as a big sponge, basically. Subsequently, that water is let out and we get a constant supply of clean, fresh, drinkable water from the rainforests. Keep taking that away, that starts to disappear. If we ever did it in Ulamuda, for example, we would have big problems for reasons, if you want to ask, I can go into later. But the same root systems also provide stability in the soil. They keep everything together. If you can imagine us all linking arms and having a little sway, we're all stabilized by the person that we're linking arms with. As soon as you break that, then all that root system starts to die and fall apart, and the soil starts to crumble. There's nothing to keep it together. So when you get rains, you get less water retention, you get more floods, you get more runoff, you get flooding, you get erosion, you get mudslides. Are we not seeing a lot of that now going on? It creates a cool environment, and that's really nice if you want to sit under a tree in hot weather, even nicer if you've got a cool drink. And if we want to maintain our attachment to that, we should be doing more of this in the urban situation. So yeah, green living in the cities, another issue. It provides a sustainable, sorry?
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
It provides a sustainable environment for the indigenous people as well. And we want to be very careful about how we infringe on their rights when we start taking it away for whatever purpose. Last but not least, biodiversity. 90% of land animal species can be found in rainforests. They are absolutely teeming and intense with wildlife. When we take the rainforests away, we lose that. And it's estimated at least around 50% maybe of our rainforests have gone, probably more. And they've gone in such a way through fires or whatever that we didn't even know the species that we've lost. Now, how sad is that? So it really, really is important if we're going to try and maintain a viable planet. We need to keep the rainforest there to keep the atmosphere going, etc. And the more we act together, the very soon we act together, the better we've got a chance to actually maintain that environment and the safety of the planet. They are very, very important.
Right. A question just came in from our audience. I think it says that I think it's for you, Wei Tai. US is leading in the geothermal energy production in the world. Do you think this energy is contributing or worsening the effects of combating climate change?
So geothermal, thanks. That's a great question on geothermal. Actually, the Philippines, I believe, is #2 in the world. So out in Southeast Asia, it's also, this is the steam coming out of the earth and using that warm boiling waters in order to generate electricity. Geothermal is considered to be a clean source of energy that does not create any form of carbon pollution because it's already using Earth's natural heat in order to create electricity. The only challenge with it is that, it is where it is. If there's no geothermal condition near where you are, then you may not be able to get it. So it's not very scalable, but for the places around the world that do have it, then it is a clean source of electricity.
Right. Now back to the forest comment. I know the slide shows a lot of forests in Asia, especially Southeast Asia, losing at an alarming rate, driven by commercially driven deforestation, wildfire, and shifting agriculture. Now, speaking of wildfire, Daniel, do you think pollution and climate change are a cause for chronic diseases?
Oh, that's actually a good question. So I just gonna share with you, bear with me, it's just gonna be a little bit long, but that's actually a 3-degree how climate change can affect our health. So the first degree is actually what we call the direct exposure, where you just exposed to the pollution. And now there's actually an evidence saying that babies have high blood pressure because their mother is exposed to air pollution. So, and countries like Poland, India, China, Indonesia, it's literally like smoking 1,000 cigarettes every day, or perhaps every year. So, what's the effect of smoking cigarettes? It leads to a lot of heart disease, diabetes, and so on. This is, what causes chronic diseases. The second degree is that when we have climate change, our plant or food do not produce enough nutrients. And you can see there's actually a degradation of nutrients. We're literally eating calories without vitamins right now. And, excessive calories just gonna cause a lot of chronic diseases such as obesity and diabetes. And then without these vitamins and minerals to help us functioning well, we are going to have, more complex health problems. And the third degree is the health equity, in which that this is a very new field in planetary health itself, where we talk about the poorest and the most remote population are the ones who suffer the most from climate change. And then, they can get sick, but it's hard for them to reach the nearest health facilities to them. So, they either do not have money to transport themselves over there, or they literally do not have the right infrastructure to travel all the way to the nearest health facility. And that results in a lot of people just, brewing with this disease, and they just give up at the end of the day. So, when we talk about climate change, we seldom talk about health, but then when we talk about health, we also don't really talk about climate change. But then now it is very, now I hope everyone in the audience and everyone in the panelists know that it is very, very important. And these two are linked closely to each other. Yeah, so thank you.
Right. Another comment came in from our online audience. Attention to Wei Tai. Says is a comment. Yeah. So thanks for the positive presentation, but please mention that electricity providing cannot be only renewable energy, since they are not pilotable, and then when there's no sun or no wind, you basically rely on coal, right? Coal is the most, in most cases, the US use for power.
Okay, so the question is, good question is that if we rely 100% on renewable energy, I mean, is it even possible? Because what happens when the sun is not shining or the wind is not blowing? You have to have some other sources. There are, and batteries are the most obvious solution. That is like the holy grail now. To complete that, low-cost battery storage would be one great way to not have to burn, coal-fired power plants. But this is a very regional solution to try to, at least in California, we rely a lot on hydroelectric, so dams. That's clean, fully clean and very cheap electricity. That's not coal. Actually, in California, we have no coal electricity. We do have a lot of natural gas peaker plants. So that is our biggest sin in California in terms of fossil fuels. But I think wherever you are around the world, the grid needs to figure out a way to provide electricity when the sun is not shining and the wind's not blowing. But I think we can solve that challenge. There are many solutions along the way. And I think we are, maybe not a few years away, but certainly decades away. And we need to start on it now.
Right. What has California done to be kind of like a role model in developing renewable energy and a low carbon future, you think?
Yes. Well, interestingly enough, our governor from 2005 was the famous actor Arnold Schwarzenegger, right, from Terminator. And he famously announced that he wanted to see 1 million solar roofs put in California. And just last year in 2019, 14 years later, we actually achieved his goals and hit the 1 million roofs. That was really exciting. In fact, 50% of all solar panels in America are installed in one state, in California. So we have a lot of solar here. We have a lot of sunshine. And I do think that is, there's a picture of, unfortunately, drilling for oil, probably in Southern California. We have some wind resources too. But our governor, more recently, Governor Jerry Brown in 2018 passed a new law that said by 2045, California would need to get 100% of its energy from clean energy resources. And so we became only the second state in America after Hawaii to declare a goal of 100% clean electricity in 2018. And thankfully, 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 other states have now joined across America. So I think that just having, whether you're a state government or a big company, if you set goals that you want to achieve and you just really press for the goals, I think that's the way to do it. If you don't have any goals, you're not going to get there. But whether you're a movie actor, you can still set a goal and achieve something great.
Right. Thanks for that. Now, from your presentation, you certainly have exercised your rights as a consumer by decarbonizing your home and eating plant-based food. Melissa, I mean, what roles do you think that consumers in Malaysia can play to fight climate change? Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Melissa.
Happens to all of us.
Okay, yeah, definitely. So one of the things I would bring up is the power that consumers actually have, because a lot of times when we watch presentations like this, when we watch all the scary climate news that comes out every day, we can feel a little bit helpless, and we don't see how we can turn our awareness into action. So people, as a sort of self-preservation, they start to block it off, So when they want to do something, often I will see people wondering, okay, is it just about plastic bags? Is it just about refusing a straw. It is so much more than that, because we are the demand. And what we don't realize is one of the papers that Ellen MacArthur found, that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation came out with, was that 45% of our carbon emissions actually comes from production of products, 55% from transportation. So everything that we use every day has a carbon impact, and a huge environmental impact that we do not see upstream, and what happens downstream as well. So we have to really think carefully about all the things that we use every day, almost on automatic, a lot of them disposable, not just plastic bags, not just straws, even free gifts, even a shirt that I bought on sale because I felt like it and I needed a little retail therapy. A lot of these things don't often have a very long use life with us before they end up, being landfilled, incinerated, or our favorite word, donated, because then it's no longer our problem. But that carbon impact has already been produced. So first off is to decrease our demand for products in the first place, and to really use these resources more intentionally, and to ask for better practices from the businesses that we do support, because we vote with our dollar, not just with our voice, which is equally as important. So support businesses that practice good business practices, and ask the businesses that you do want to support but don't have great practices to improve on those practices. Encourage them to go after the low-hanging fruit, like removing packaging, going for more sustainable options, etc. So that's kind of what I want to say about how consumers, we people, individuals, can support the climate crisis, support the action against the climate crisis, apart from things like petitions and protests.
Right. Jeremy, you've done a lot of work with communities as well. What's your thought on what can be done to empower communities or consumers?
Okay. Again, I don't know how to top Melissa, but thanks for the lineup again. but yeah, I think rightly I support whatever that Melissa has just mentioned. The power remains with the consumer itself, right? If there's no demand, there's no production to things. But on top of that, for communities itself, sometimes I think it's about just learning to start. See, sometimes when we go to conferences like this, looking at the panels, we will see that they have done leaps and bounds. And sometimes the fear is, when I start this movement or when I start this lifestyle, is it good enough? Right? So for communities, sometimes we just whether is it big, whether it's small, you just got to start. And I think one thing as a community, including ourselves itself, is that we should never try to maintain the green social status. We should never do it just because we want to have a tagline behind us, right? Because there's no perfect eco practitioner in my point of view, right? At the end of the day, we are all still learning. Apart from that, big or small, your contribution is still a contribution to the society and to Mother Nature itself. So for me, in terms of community, we just got to start somewhere. If you don't know how to go about it, just do something really simple in life, right? Like Melissa had mentioned, right? Before you buy something, what I usually do is, you think about it for 7 days, right? I mean, do you really need it, right? Just because there's a sale, do you really need it, right? Apart from that, if you are somebody who enjoys coffee or just need a caffeine boost, right? Just get a bottle, right? Instead of going to the cafe and just getting, plastic cups, just get a bottle and fill it in there. That's what I did as well. Unfortunately, as I say, I bought something really nice, but that was with the intention that I know I'm going to use it for the next 5 years. But that's where I'm going with it right now, with all my bottles everywhere, from work all the way to meetings. Yeah. Thanks.
Nice. Talk about conscious consumer. I look at Rafiq and I know he's a conscious consumer. Look at him. He grows his own food. The man grows his own food. So what do you think? Why do you think people are so reluctant to start growing their own food, Rafiq?
Thanks, Henry. Thanks the panel members for the build-up, I suppose. So let me see. I can see that but this is trying to relate with what Melissa and also Jeremy was saying. Climate reality leaders or activists. We have seen them doing a lot of big stuff. But then again, how can we, the common people, can do something about it, because we can submit petitions, we can do protests, but what about the majority of the activities we do every day, And in my case, I choose to grow the food ingredients that we usually we usually use at home. So the question was, why is it that people are reluctant or hesitant to start? Well, simply speaking, there are a few of them. Number one is that it's messy. You work with soil, you may encounter pests, you may encounter, for example, poisonous or no venomous animal. Even if you're working in an unkempt area, for example. But if you see the kind of growing that I do, I don't actually have to go into the jungle and start clearing everything. That's like counterintuitive. So what I did was, well, I just bought some, forgive me for this, plastic pots, because well, it can be used for a long time. I hope so. So put some pots, put some organic matter into it, some compost, and then put seeds into it. And you have to realize as well, plants, what do they need? They don't need much. Number one, they need light. Number two, water. And number three, minerals. That's pretty much it. So if you have all those three in order of importance, whatever it is that you are trying to plant, it will grow. As you can see in the vegetables that I try to grow, like the cabbages and also the gingers, gigantic gingers, as it turned out to be, and then also spinach and chilies. Another reason is that people would think that there's going to be pests eating the fruits and vegetable. Okay, so that's not going to be very simple to overcome, I must say. But you have to realize as well, when you do something like this, you cannot expect to achieve 100% yield. Even industrial farms can't do that. So so us as the local consumer, we just start small. You think of what you want to grow. What is it that you want to eat, first of all? If you want to eat something exotic, then you have to reconsider. Start with something that can be easily grown, for example, like tomatoes, for example. So another reason, it could be expensive. If you try to mechanize, if you want to make it so systematic, it can be quite expensive. But if you do it on a very small scale first, even if you haven't done it before, then it's actually really cheap. You need some pots. If you have a piece of land, no matter how small, if you get sunlight, you're good to go.
Right. So I just want to go back to what Daniel said earlier about the inequality that climate change has caused. Now, Sona, how do you think diversity, equity, and inclusions are crucial in solving the challenges of these issues?
Thank you so much, Henry, for that question. And I often see that people don't see a direct correlation between diversity and inclusion and climate change. And if you ask me, I sincerely believe that the climate change is actually the single most biggest threat to the marginalized people globally. If you think about any kind of vulnerabilities and the health burdens that we spoke about earlier that comes because of climate change, it actually falls disproportionately upon the lower income communities and the communities of color. And let me give you some examples to kind of tell you what's happening globally, right? So early this year, at least 500,000 people got impacted by Typhoon Wongfong in Philippines. And what happened was, because of the extensive rains and winds and storm, over 1,000 homes got completely destroyed and over 6,000 homes were damaged. And if you think about it, most of these homes were homes of underprivileged communities. Also early this year, and this is very close to my country, we have this land called Sundarbans, which is shared between Bangladesh and India. And historically, it is considered as one of the most fertile lands with very high yield. And over the years, because of the increasing impact of climate change, the seeds is advancing into the land at the rate of 200 yards per year. Now, if you think about what's happening, it's creating two different kind of impact. One, that it is really impacting the livelihood of the farmers who stay in that area, because now those lands are no more agriculturable. But the second, which for me is extremely heartwarming, is that over 1 million people have to evacuate and migrate to a different place. Now, I don't think so anybody on this panel can even imagine how it could potentially be like to be displaced and to suddenly call a place that we call as home and leave that place and go to a completely different place and rehabilitate. So I think it's emotionally very overwhelming for me when we think about what's happening with the underprivileged communities globally. I mean, I see this picture from Africa. Kenya is very similar because of increasing temperatures. They are seeing massive impact in the yield for barley and maize, which is impacting the supply chain and also the livelihood of the farmers in the communities. Now, let's talk about the communities of color. And I think this is a very debatable topic, and a lot of people get very passionate about this. In one of the recent studies, it was shown that the Black and the Hispanic communities in the US have to face far more air pollution than the amount of pollutants they're actually ingesting into the environment. On the contrary, the white Americans experience much more better air quality than the amount of pollutants they are ingesting into the environment. Now, this is to me, a little questionable also because it can be probably because of discriminatory housing policies. But what I took away from the article when I was reading was the racial inequality. Because when people are facing racial inequality, what it also does is that people who are most at the risk of climate change also do not have the resources to cope with such circumstances. And a case in point is what happened during Hurricane Katrina in the US, when 30% of the Black community people could not evacuate the city because they did not have cars. And it significantly impacted the population of the Black community within the city after the impact got resided. And if I just have to extrapolate, overall globally, over 24 million people get displaced due to extreme weather conditions. And if you think about displacement, majority of the times it is lower income communities, underprivileged communities, and communities of color. So I sincerely believe if we really want to solve climate change at the root, we have to solve for diversity and inclusion and have to make sure that communities who are most affected by the impact of climate change actually have a voice and are actively involved in the decisions for climate adaptation.
Right. Thanks for that. We're actually running out of time, but we still have some questions. So I'm just going to ask the organizers if we can extend, we can overrun this for probably 10, 15 minutes. Is everybody okay with this? Thank you. Awesome. Now, one of the questions that came in online is plant-based food product. Now, Wei Tai, you talked about it on your slide, on your presentation. Can you tell us more about plant-based food? I mean, just looking from your slide, right? I mean, the resources that goes into making a vegan, plant-based burger compared to a beef burger is just mind-blowing.
Yes, yes. I shared with you all on one of my earlier slides about how more efficient it is to get our nutrition and protein and calories from plants rather than beef. In fact, one thing as I only started studying this in the last 2 years, how eating a plant-based diet can be part of the solution to climate change. And the most stunning figure I learned is that eating beef, if you want, for each 1 calorie of beef we consume, it took 25 calories of input, right? You had to feed the cow something, all those years, all that energy and input. It took 25 calories of input for me to eat 1 calorie when it ended up on my plate. Now, compare that with pork. Pork is 15-to-1 ratio. Chicken is much more efficient, 9 calories of input to 1 calorie of consumption. That's why people say, you know, eating a chicken is more better for the planet than eating beef. But if you eat the plant directly rather than having to feed a beef or a chicken or a pork, you can imagine that the number is way less than 9. And so that to me is like, wow, how are we going to feed the planet if it needs 25-to-1 ratio versus, you know, single digit ratios? And here is the chart that I showed you earlier. So that was just the energy input versus output, but just in terms of comparing land, how much water does it take, how much land, and so forth. This is the chart showing the reduction. and many of you might be reading in the news now, Dominic talked about forest, and I looked at that Brazil was all red on that chart back then. And you may know that Brazil the rainforests are on fire right now, a historic highs, the amount that are being burned down. And the question is, why is that happening? It's to clear the land in order to plant more crops to feed cows, right? For global consumption of beef, right? So it's really all around beef consumption, and the Brazilian rainforests are a huge carbon sink that we must preserve in order to have a chance at really combating the climate crisis. So it is, and this relates to consumer choice that Melissa was talking about earlier. Can we change our consumption patterns and what we decide to buy or eat? And the answer is yes. All of us eat every day, so we have that choice to eat lower on the food chain. And talk about it too with our friends, because I love eating meat and seafood and everything else. But as I educated myself more on this, I really realized the damaging impacts and how, a couple days a week and maybe more than that, we can change our diet to impact the planet. So I think the future of plant-based meats is very, very rosy.
Wait, I just want to add one more thing there, right? Because there is
Yes.
an impact on a lot of water consumption. So, for example, it takes about 15,000 liters of water to produce 1 kg of beef, in contrast to about 180 liters of water to produce 1 kg of tomatoes. So, if you just scale that with the amount of beef we need to produce to feed the population, we can literally solve for water crisis, especially in all the tier 3, tier 4 cities in a lot of emerging developing markets.
Fantastic. Thank you for also mentioning that. So it is just mind-boggling to think 15,000 liters for 1 kilogram of beef, but we ignore that. We don't know that. But if we really thought about it, then do we really have to eat such big portions of meat? And for me, at least, the answer is no. I've tried the other plant-based, and they're quite delicious.
From our resident nutritionist Daniel, what do you think? What do you think could be a diet that won't harm the climate?
So yeah, I mean, the Lancet Committee has come up with a new term called the planetary diet, in which, like Wei-Tai just shared, a plant-based diet and so on. But then borrowing on Wei-Tai's example on how Brazil is clearing their land because of, they want to produce more food to feed on the animals. Part of the land that they're clearing is also to plant soybeans, which is one of the most important part of plant-based diet. So, for me, plant-based diet can be a double-edged sword. We can actually shift to that, which increase in demand of plant-based diet, which we're going to, clear more land to plant all this wheat and, soybeans and so on. But then the most important part of planetary diet is to be mindful about your carbon choice. So I think choosing to be healthy is naturally the best way to become very friendly to your planet. So for instance, if you choose to be active, naturally, you would choose to have a green park rather than a concrete jungle, right? So you want to have a park for you to jog every day and so on. And then, but food choice is a little bit tricky, but it's very straightforward. You just need to choose the freshest and the local produce. So freshest food are usually, food that is produced within your community or within your country. It's not the exported food and so on. So these food are generally, first of all, they have the least amount of packaging because they do not need to be, packed and then transferred from this country to another country. And they're also fresh. So they have the best amount of vitamins and minerals without all the amount of pesticide or preservatives and so on. So, and another thing is that by choosing being healthy, you also need to plan the amount of food and to plan your day. So planning is very important. A lot of people, they become very, the consumption pattern is highly affected when you do not plan your day. So when you choose to be healthy, you plan your food. So you reduce your amount of consumption, and you also reduce the amount of food waste that you produce every day. And when you plan your day subconsciously, you actually travel less because you only go out when you really need to go out. And you also do a lot of other things that, like going for a jog, or meeting up friends, or saying hi to your neighbor, and so on. You save a lot of resources there, your money, your time, and most importantly, your carbon resources. You literally do not make a lot of impact on the environment. So I think generally planetary diet, there is no specific food that you need to eat, but it's just talking about your behavior and your consumption patterns. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, nice. Thanks for that roundup, actually. We're actually running out of time. So there's still quite a number of questions that are coming in, but organizers has told us to wrap it up 10 minutes. So what do you think, guys? A round of final thoughts? I know we can keep this conversation going on all day, but we've been told to pull the curtain on our little chat here. So let's go for a round of roundups. Let's begin in reverse order, so nobody gets to complain about whose profile or whose closing is better than the other. All right. So let's go with Rafiq then.
Right, Henry. Pleasure to be here. So I would say that we have to depend on ourselves first of all to for the change that we want in our life, and also when we realize the climate reality that we are having. And I believe that we can start by making healthy food choices, and naturally, a healthy food choice would result in you trying to grow your own food, because that's going to be undoubtedly the freshest and then the most readily available that you can get. So don't be intimidated to grow your own food. Start small, and you have to think what you want to eat, because you cannot grow strawberries in Malaysia if you're in lowland, and conversely, if you're in a cold climate, you cannot grow mangoes, for example. So start small, and when you have gotten your first crop, your confidence will increase significantly. So I can see that there is a lot of potential in Asia based on the data that you presented just now. So although our climate is suitable for growing food, but there is still a lack of effort in that. So as a consumer, we can start ourselves in this food growing journey. Right.
Thanks for that, Rafiq. Thank you. Jeremy, final thoughts?
Right. Yep. I'm just going to do a little call to action. So basically, it's just start big, start small, but the end goal is just to start. When you start, don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about being ashamed of practicing your lifestyle. Look, if you look close enough, there's somebody else who is also practicing the similar things. If not, just reach out to any of the panelists here today to guide you through. Yeah. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jeremy. Dom, take it away. You're on mute. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'd certainly like to see a lot more emphasis placed on education, because I understand that the environment isn't really in school syllabus, for example, and that's a big bad thing. More emphasis put on renewable energy. I've read articles that said Malaysia can easily do huge amounts with renewable energy. Look at all the sunshine we've got for a start. Social inequality has been mentioned by others of my colleagues here, and that's very important. Getting around to the rainforest, well, we've got to save the ecosystem. So if you save the ecosystem, everything else falls into place. Trying to save pandas, trying to save orangutans, trying to save tigers, tapirs, or whatever. If you haven't got an environment for them to live in, that's not going to work. If we save the whole ecosystem, we reduce the carbon dioxide, and we provide and preserve all that biodiversity that we actually need. So save the ecosystem, start rewilding, stop deforestation, and it will make a big contribution to the problem that we're facing. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Dom, Thanks for that, Dom. Dan the man, Daniel, what's your final thought?
Yeah, so I have two call to action, I would term it. So the first one is to reconnect with nature. So I think just go around and find the nearest park and try to, like go for a walk or jog. And during this pandemic, I'm pretty sure there's less people going to the park, and you can just, like try to absorb all the nature energy that's available for you. And, trust me and believe it that it will be more refreshing and more empowering as compared to walking in the mall. It's literally very different. The second one is for the male audience or the male in the panelists. Bring your man bag. So always have your water bottle inside, your Tupperwares and everything. That's very important. And to the ladies in the audience and in the panel, I'm pretty sure your handbag can be a very useful tool for you to carry all these, reusable items. And, your choice actually makes a lot of difference. Start from an individual perspective. Don't think about policy changing and everything. Let's start the change with you first. Thank you.
Awesome. I think the ladies have a head start on us men on the back situation. Sona, go for it, Sona.
Thank you so much, Henry. So, I enjoyed the conversation today, and what I'm taking back is that the cost of climate change is almost unquantifiable. We are looking at it from various facets like political instability, floods, famines, wildfires, infrastructure losses, loss of human life. So if we start putting a dollar amount to it, we almost cannot quantify it. And but the future is still very optimistic. I mean, with everything that our panelists have shared, there is so much more that all of us can do on our individual levels. And there are three things I would like to say. Which is number one, being self-aware. It all starts from curiosity. I mean, we can all choose to take a stand of, okay, it does not bother us on a day-to-day basis. Why should we care? Or we can spend a little bit more time to understand the unknowns and really understand what does it mean to be in other people's shoes and lead the conversation with a lot more empathy. So I would sincerely encourage people to generally be more curious about the topic and see what we can do at our own individual levels. The second piece would be taking accountability. We all have to start small, and if everybody in the audience and panelists can pick up one or two things they want to do starting today, which will impact livelihood of themselves and people around them, would be a huge plus. And it could be very small things, right? Things like, okay, we are going to take public transportation instead of driving car every day, or we are going to choose to purchase only from brands that are authentically sustainable, and so forth. So it does not have to be something big. The third piece, which has personally worked very well for me, is communicate. Because when you are communicating your goals and your passion to the outside world, you're doing two things. One, you believe in yourself that you are on the right path, but you're also influencing and inspiring others to create a wider community impact. And before you know, you're probably already creating a movement. So I would sincerely recommend that when you are making any kind of climate pledge, use your social media forums, talk about it to your friends, and see how you can collectively inspire people around you to make this world a better place.
Nice. Thanks for that, Sona. Melissa, last but not least.
Thanks. I'm going to be echoing what Jeremy and some of the other panelists have said as well. Act now, and don't wait for anyone. Don't wait for the businesses to change. Don't wait for industries, for government to do something about it. Act now. The power of the individual is incredible, because everywhere we are all individuals. So, you're part of a business, you're an employee, you're an employer, you're part of a community, you're in a neighborhood. There are so many people you can influence. What you want to do is look for opportunities to be the problem solver, solve problems, because there are too many problems out there and we can't wait for someone else to take care of it. Be the connector. So, what I do is something that anyone can do. Make suggestions instead of just complaining, make suggestions, connect them to solutions, give them new perspectives of how we can do better. And that's how you can, influence people and your communities and your businesses. It doesn't take 100,000 followers on social media. If you have 5 people on social media, that's 5 people you can influence. And be the example, because the people around you, they watch. They don't listen to talk. Do this, do that. No, they watch what you do and you're like, that's a good idea. I should do it too.
Wow, fantastic! That was an awesome speech. Wonderful, Melissa. Wei Tai, why don't you share your final thoughts and help us close the dialogue? And we can
Great.
see you right off into the sunset. You're in California, right? You're the only one, literally, who can ride off into the sunset right now for us.
That's right. It's getting dark over here now. Well, thanks to all of everybody in the audience who has been here now almost 2 hours. And when we started 2 hours ago, you heard me start off with my personal story, saying that I was really, frankly, depressed 10 years ago, that we were not doing enough, and that we were not going to potentially solve this in my lifetime. But I also told you that more recently, I'm actually very hopeful. And that is because over the years later, I have met so many people like my fellow panelists on this call who continue to reinforce in my heart every day I hear them, I see like, wow, people around the world, normal people like you and me, care about the climate crisis and are doing things at their home, in their businesses, they're speaking up. And I didn't feel so alone. And this is honestly a conference like this, and all of you, the hundreds of you who are attending this, it's so impressive. And that really warms my heart and makes me feel like we will do this. There is a global tidal wave happening now that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're going to do it in our lifetimes. And so when we ask the question, must we change? Can we change? And will we change? I am ever more hopeful that we will change. We are changing. And I thank all of you attendees on this call for joining us, and salute you for being part of this movement, and encourage you to continue to do as much as we possibly can together. So thank you. And Henry, back to you.
Thanks. So you can find out more about the Climate Reality projects and get in touch with the Climate Reality leaders by visiting www.climaterealityproject.org. One of the main tasks of a climate reality leader is to raise awareness to climate change through the very same slideshow that Mr. Al Gore used in The Inconvenient Truth. Of course, the slides have been continuously updated throughout the years since 2006. But one thing has never changed, as Wei Tai had said, is the message that we must, we can, and we will solve the climate crisis. I encourage you to reach out to the climate reality leaders in Malaysia and request them to give your family, friends, and colleagues a personalized presentation like the one that Wei Tai has given you today. Bear in mind that the MCO or the lockdown is probably best to do it online for the time being. And also, today's session will be available on the iGEM virtual website until the end of December this year. So please spread the words to your family, relative, friends, colleagues, whoever, to watch it on demand anytime in the comfort of their own home. Some of you may be locked down at home, and I find watching this kind of conversation can give you some sense of a human interaction of sorts. And finally, I would like to thank from the Sustainability and Climate Action Leadership Exchange Scale, I'd like to thank the iGEM organizer, a massive terima kasih for hosting such a fantastic week-long virtual event. Terima kasih to all the wonderful men and women working behind the scene for making this dialogue today such a big success as well. And on behalf of everyone here in the Climate Reality Project, we look forward to working with you on building a better tomorrow for future generations. Thank you very much. Take care. Selamat tinggal.